Hey, everybody, welcome back. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bob, it's good to see you.
It is good to see you. Thank you for coming back. You have fixed the tubes and wires. As I've
I
told our
evidently,
listeners, I got I just kept getting texts for tubes and wires, tubes and wires.
our internet service, our cable service freaked out for some reason, and it seems like we were having problems beforehand, but we had to work with them, and by we I mean mostly Adrian Nash did all the heavy lifting because I'm deaf and I can't hear anybody. But and she's really good at being emphatic. So
Yeah,
ultimately, with a
she
lot of
is.
work and a lot of effort, she got them to fix it. It took 2 or 3 days. Hey, Sherry, and evidently things are working. So I shut up and just do what I do.
That's awesome. All right. I'm so glad you're back because we have lots to talk about. Now, I talked a little bit last week about um we have more guests saying hi. Everybody, welcome in. Join us. We're gonna have our a big guest in a little bit. Usually we bring our guest in around about 10-15 minutes, but we're gonna talk about some stuff. We both have seen the Marvels, and I talked about it a little bit last week. I want your opinion on the movie, just in general first.
I had a great time.
I had a great time.
That's it's what a superhero movie should be. You know, it's a lot of action and some interesting action-oriented character developments, and everything I loved from the Ms. Marvel TV series, which is the family, was there. And that was the
Mhm.
heart of that movie as it was with the TV show. And I just enjoyed the poo out of it. Plus, Goose is great. What can I tell you?
Well, it's true. It's true. Um, I've had some conversations with some people about it, and while I came away with the same thing, and I have, if I'm in a theater and I don't fall asleep, I usually take that as a win.
Yeah,
Um, in the moment, something has to be really bad to take me out of it and say this is terrible. I don't like this. After leaving a theater or something, I'll think about, well, that they probably could have done this differently or that. And in that movie, there was one moment where I was like, I don't know where this is going, and it seems a little weird, but then they paid it off, so I was
hmm
happy with it. Um, but like I said, there wasn't perfect, and when you think about it again later, you can find fault with parts. But in the moment where I went and I paid that money to experience that film, and experiencing a film is what you're supposed to do.
that's right.
And especially that movie, it was fun, it was entertaining, there were parts where I felt emotional about things, there were parts where I was like, where I was excited, and that was great, I thought. So I am shocked to some degree at the number one fact that someone had posted on on my Facebook feed that, like, I think that based on his Facebook feed, that only his friends were the people who went to the movies based on how much it made, because everybody seemed to be going to it who were friends of ours, and at the same time, we all seem to enjoy it. It's very fun, enough, to be a fun movie. Yet it poor, did poorly, according to people's expectations. And the second weekend, I was hoping for it to do well, and apparently did not as well. I don't really understand.
I think people are less motivated to see less consequential movies for a variety of reasons. It's a pain in the ass to go to a movie theater. You know, it
True.
used to be if you lived in a city or even a small town of a decent size, you could almost walk to your movie theater. And when I was a kid, I certainly could. I never drove to a movie theater. Um, so you got to get in the car and you got to go drive someplace. You got to find the theater that has it at the time you want it with the right screen, and then you got to go and pay thousands and thousands of dollars, and that's just for the popcorn.
Right.
I don't I don't know if it really is worth it. If you're with a whole bunch of people, that's a different thing. That's a fun time, but it has to be at a time when you can get a whole bunch of people. We went to see it, in what they used to call matinees,
Sure.
and there were like four people in the theater, which was not was kind of disheartening. But
Well, you went on
okay, there were four
Thursday though,
people.
or something like that.
Yeah, we went on Thursday. We went the day it opened, and the worst part of it for me as a theatrical experience was that one of the like two or three other people who were in the theater decided to sit right next to us, and I mean right the other side of Adrian, right next to us, and that was creepy.
Well, we
But the
went.
last time that happened to me, it was John Larroquette who
Well,
did
that you
that.
don't complain about.
Oh, I
And
did
of
actually, because
course,
he was noisy. Um, jo- uh, Brian Augustin and I were in Hollywood doing Flash TV show things. That was the first Flash TV show, and we had time to kill for our plane. Waiting for our plane. So we went to the theater because we're at the Universal Studios complex, staying at the Sheraton there, and the only other person in the theater was John Larroquette, and he sat exactly right behind us.
and then he was
What
loud.
That was odd. Yeah, and then he would make strange noises and stuff. I like John Larroquette. Actually, I like him a lot.
Sure,
But that was a creepy.
that is
that
weird.
that was creepy. you know.
Well, like I said, it was weird. It was funny. We went and saw it on Saturday that it opened. It was a 10:30 a.m. showing, and it was pretty full. It
Yeah.
was for 10:30 a.m. And so at that point, I'm like, oh, people are coming to see the movie. Good. I think part of what you were saying, as we get into some of this stuff, but part of what you were saying about it used to be easier to go to the movies, and I think there's a lot to say with that. But I want to go back to like right before the pandemic, and let's say the 5 years before COVID-19.
Okay.
Um, every superhero movie came out, it was a huge success. It was a success after success.
Hmm.
Um, and and um, there was a break. Like it was what 2018 was Endgame, I think, because 2019 everything,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
or
Somewhere
20,
around
29 2019 was Endgame.
somewhere around 2019, people
Yeah,
started to go, "Holy shit, I can die."
yeah, that was in 2020. So 2020 when everything shut down. So in 2019 though, up until that point, everything was like unbelievably huge, and it was, and I just don't think that regardless of the pandemic that we all experienced would have been sustainable. Like at some point, it's just like you can't go to the movies every month, and get every movie can't make all this money. But there's a problem that comes into that, like the financing of making movies, the cost of making movies is astronomical.
Yep.
And we have WB Disney Discovery, whatever Discovery people, just writing off movies. Did you see recently there was an article I saw where they want to investigate the writing off of Batgirl?
Yes. Um, and they did back off from the Roadrunner movie, from the Wile E. Coyote movie.
Well, they that I don't understand. Like there's a movie that they've already made and they don't want to distribute it, so they're going to sell the distribution rights to somebody else.
Right, because they'll make more profit in the short term. The trick, and it's something that people who analyze these numbers tend to ignore. There are two things they tend to ignore. The first is, hey, the Marvels did better than any other movie that weekend, so let's look at the
Sure.
curve here.
Yeah.
But the second is that the studios who are screaming poverty, even though they're paying their top executives, $300 million a year, which is true. Um, it's the return on investment. They borrow the money to make the movies. Some of that, most of that money is borrowed, and all of that money is money they could put to other uses.
Mhm.
on a conglomerate level. It doesn't have to be for movies, it doesn't have to be for that movie. And yet they're trying to sell us these streaming services where you may be not watching something every week on that service or every month on that service. So why are you spending, $200 a year for that service? Well, you're going to have a hard time getting people to go into the movie theater if they know it's going to wind up on the streaming service because they're already spending 60, 80 bucks, $100 for two people to go to the theater. So you might as well just wait until it's streaming. It's a whole different world, and the people who are making the movies and spending the money don't understand it. I get that part. I'm not sure they could understand it because it's in transition. It will always be in transition. So if they're going to go pay interest, which is more now than it was, before
Sure.
before the pandemic, if they have to pay interest on all that money, they just act goofy. They just act goofy. Batgirl, okay, maybe it was a horrible, terrible movie that they never should have made. Maybe it was, the next Gone with the Wind of superhero movies. I don't know. That's part of the crap game when you're making movies. You don't know how it's going to do. If you see a movie and you don't like it, you'd say, why did they make that movie? Can't they tell it's a piece of shit? Well, no, they can't. And they
Well,
certainly can't tell that you are going to think it's a piece of shit.
and that's something else I wanted to get into because I have this like there is this double-edged sword to making comic movies, and that they are making movies about comic books and nerdy stuff that 40 years ago we couldn't imagine that they would have done. When it almost feels like it may have been easier. When we were the only nerds who read comics and watched cartoons that were in inappropriate ages, and now, when there's a comic movie coming out and then you hear people's reactions to them and they want your reactions to them. And for you to say, well, I'm glad you enjoy this, but it's not my cup of tea because I have a different feeling about that character that they're trying to tell me is the character that I already know, which is
Right.
which is sometimes a reaction that I have to things. But by the same token, I don't begrudge anybody else's, opinion of watching a movie and enjoying it. I may have problems with people liking a character because of that particular character's motivations or something like that. That's neither here nor there. But
Yeah, but no, that makes sense.
right. So I am not, it's been said before, I hate the Joker in every form possible. And so I'm not going to see that movie, and I've never seen it movie. I won't see it. I won't see the next one. I'm a huge fan of Lady Gaga. I'm not going to see that movie because I don't like that character. So when people tell me, "Oh, but you have to see it," and it's the same concept that I had with the number one movie this past weekend, right? Did you see that was the Hunger Games prequel?
Oh,
I have no desire to see a movie about the origin of the villain.
right.
Why? Why do I want to know about? Well, he's relatable. I don't want him relatable. He's a murdering psychopath, and that's what he is. It doesn't matter that one time he fell in love.
Right. That's right. That's right. I mean, Hitler got married the day before he killed her and him. That didn't make
Why
me feel
is he
better
coming up
about
so
the
much
dude.
today?
I mean, I agree with you, but it's it's a visceral experience. You pays your money, you take your chances. Nobody says that for your $15 for a ticket or whatever, and $50 for the popcorn, they are obligated to give you a movie that you are going to like. The odds
Right.
are the same either way. But you put out more to go see a movie these days. So if the if the planets haven't lined up right, and you don't want to go see that movie at this moment in time, or maybe in a theater at all, which is the future, that's the way it is.
It's fair. It's fair. Um, I I kind of want to just slightly pivot off of this because one of the things where we're having this discussion about the way people feel, feel about films, there is this incessant uh, need to push sensationalism in cast announcements and fan casts, and if someone
Right.
says has an inkling that this might be a thing and whispers something, then it's the truth and it must be believed, and we have to have huge discussions over who this person might be playing in a film. It doesn't matter who's playing who until the film is made. You don't know what the
Right.
script's going to look like. You don't know what the people are going to look like. I find so over the past and we're guilty of all of this stuff. I remember being a teenager the day that I heard that Mr. Mom was going to be Batman and just being crestfallen. But
You should have
but
been
but
at
it,
the you should have been at DC's offices
I'm
that day.
sure.
It
How was
was
that?
we were all bumping into walls. It was like, what the hell? And then people from the studio say, no, no, wait a moment, go see Clean and Sober.
Oh, that's fair.
And well, no,
And I was
because
wrong.
they told us to go see Clean and Sober before it was released, so there wasn't much we could do about it. But when it was released, we saw Clean and Sober, and it says, "Yeah, that guy can act." And you know what? That guy can act really well, and Batman is the least of it. I'm not putting down his Batman. I probably prefer it to the others, but it was a whole different world. You can put
Sure.
Rin Tin Tin in that costume, and it doesn't matter. It's Michael Keaton playing Bruce Wayne, and he
Right.
was a terrific Bruce Wayne.
I felt that way. Um I the thing that kind of brought me to this topic was that there was a headline, and I think it was Variety. I think it might have been it was a decent Variety or Hollywood Reporter, one of them, talking about the casting of Angela Spica in the Superman movie.
Hmm.
And and it was the villain engineer is what she was labeled as. Villain was clearly in the headline.
Right,
Angela Spica has never been a villain.
right.
And James Gunn commented something along those lines. He kind of made a offhanded, but it wasn't. It just like how does that happen? How does it happen where you blatantly say to everyone in the world that in this movie the engineer is going to be the villain, and I just don't see that. I see her being cast, and I can't imagine that this movie that he's making would be put her as a central role as the antagonist.
And we don't know whether she is or not. I
Right?
mean,
We don't.
Lex
Okay.
Luthor is hanging out there.
Yeah, he was cast. What did you think of that?
Uh, the casting for everybody in the movie are, by my standards, and I'm 1,000 years old, newcomers. you know,
Sure.
I
Well, I
mean,
mean,
they're
Nicholas Holt's been he
right.
is he's not as new of a newcomer.
No, no, but they're
And yeah.
go ahead. They're they're
Well,
they're all they're all people who we're not used to seeing in those types of movies over and over again. So I think, hey, great, terrific. Let's go for it.
yeah,
Let's see something. Let's see some people doing some stuff that we haven't seen them do before or them use that way before. I want to see a new experience. And, they've only done 1,000 different types of Superman movies. And after the first Superman movie, or arguably the second Superman movie, most of them kind of sucked. Superman deserved better than those movies. And fine. Give me something new. I'm fine with that. Just make sure that the Superman that I'm seeing on the screen has something to do with the Superman that I've known and grown up with and been gawking at for 3/4 of a century. The better
so
part.
So what if they made let's put it to you this way. What if Superman Legacy um was Superman um I just lost the name of it. Um what if it was like Deceased or something like that? One of the things where Superman turns bad, or if it was a bad version of Superman, the video game version. I've lost the name in my head. Um
Uh,
the
oh,
one Tom the Tom Taylor story.
yeah, which I liked. Injustice.
Injustice, yes.
Yeah.
What if they made Injustice?
That would be a mistake because we don't. You can't go contrary. The whole thing about injustice is that Superman's the bad guy. That's what the injustice part is all about, and that contrast isn't there unless you establish him first as a really good guy that you like and that you want to have save the world. And now all of a sudden he's not. Okay, interesting, but you have to establish the first part first, and they haven't done that, which is why they're not making it. So fine.
I hope.
I hope.
I hope.
Yes, good point. I have trust in the director, the writer director, because he's entertained me along these lines in the past. He's made 5 movies, superhero movies that, or 4, something like that, that I've enjoyed. 5.
Mhm.
And bless him for it. Maybe 6, and I'll give him a shot. He's earned that. I would love to see DC getting some good superhero movies, and I know that that pressure is not going to come from management because the people who are running Warner Brothers Discovery wouldn't know a good story if it bit them on the ass and suck out all the guts.
Where are we? Here's the thing. You and I are having a conversation. We're just two people with microphones and headphones. We don't make these decisions. You have been around people making decisions like this in the past. I find that, and this goes back to my comment about the engineer, that there's this need for immediacy and need to make the smallest thing urgently important. And I find that that part of media coverage, regardless of topic, has been a disservice to any part of society that media is serving.
Absolutely. And it's true with everything. Everything that comes across the media, excuse me, and everything comes across the media.
Mm-hmm.
So, how the media interprets it, how individuals within the media interpret it, or how they choose to sell it is vital. They're not going to do it the best way. They're going to do it in the most exploitative way, by and large. And they're not going to do it in consult with others. They're just going to express their opinions. This whole, well, the media has this master strategy to screw us all over. Those people are too paranoid to own a television. We should take it away from them.
You have to tell me when you're going to end like that.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna drop hot potatoes all the time. I've got 3 weeks worth of energy here to let go of.
I want to talk about your latest column, which was up on Monday yesterday.
Oh yeah.
You were very excited about this thing that I saw existed and said I'm never going to watch that, and would not have expected that you would have watched it. So it is what it's called, 007, the James Bond adventure or something like that.
The Road to a Million, which
Road
sounds
to
like
a Million Pounds
Bing
or something like
Crosby should be in it.
So it's a reality show
Yeah,
where people try to perform James Bond like feats and not get eliminated on a week to week basis. How tell me how this is laid out.
you've got it exactly right.
Okay,
Now, I don't watch. I hardly watch any reality television
neither do
because I don't want to watch TV for reality except for the news, and that's my reality. So, I want escapism, but they're doing it like as if it was a James Bond movie. I mean, okay, admittedly, it's sort of on the cheap, and they got the best guy to be the villain I could imagine, a
sure.
guy who I'd stand in line to see as a full blown James Bond villain.
We're
They
talking
got
about
the
Brian Cox.
Yes, and they got the music, they got the bad guy, they've got the vistas in terms of how they use their location work. That's very James Bondian.
Hmm.
But the difference is that okay, Bond is an adventure hero. He's a it's heroic fantasy. This here TV show is heroic reality because these people actually have to do it, and doing it by the James Bond standards so far, I haven't seen the whole thing yet, is wonderful. They pulled it off. If they had somebody else starring in it, maybe it wouldn't work. But that's the glue, and they found the right glue, and they found the right man to give it to us. So I'm enjoying
Cool.
it. It's, just that simple. I watched it because I think because I was bored. And I mentioned that I'd been watching a bunch of James May reality shows, which I just love. James May is one of the reasons why I pay my cable bill. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I think it's fun stuff.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. What I'm
Thank you.
just I'm just letting people know. I just got an email from our guest saying he was having a problem getting in the link. I just sent it back to him, so hopefully he'll be here shortly. Um, but what what makes what makes this um, a reality show that you would watch? Because are there my biggest problem with reality show TV is that the is the I often find that they pit the contestants against each other and foster enmity.
Yes.
Is that taking place in this?
No, so far. And again, they dropped the whole thing all at once. I did not. I don't do that. I watch shows like once every couple of days, and I'm
Sure.
having a good time that way. But so far, no. It is strictly the task, and the two people teams have to meet that task, not each other. So the petty, stupid part of what I see from reality programming uh, isn't there,
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean,
they're not gonna kill, they're not gonna get killed, and if they do, you're not gonna see it, and you probably would have heard about it beforehand. So the trick is to watch how they do it and how close they get. What defeats them is not getting the information. They have to go through these incredible challenges to get the briefcase that asks them the question that chances are they're not going to be able to answer. They're going to have to guess, and they're going to have to figure it out. And that's cool.
yeah.
You know, if somebody's an asshole and they're trying to stop somebody else from winning, that's not part of the show. At least not so far.
All right. I'm glad you're loving it. It's not for me. I'm not going to be watching it, but anybody
And
out
that's
there who wants
fine.
to, but we will take questions if anybody wants to get it. We can talk to Mike about it. I'm gonna we're gonna pivot though because our guest is here. He's in the green room. I'm very excited. And I usually write this long thing about about why we want to have why we want to have guests on and talk about it. And I didn't tonight because he's one of the people who goes without any need for introduction, and I'm going to try and do that. But we have Erik Larsen as our guest tonight. I remember, and we'll get into this, I remember the first time I saw Erik Larsen's art very distinctly, and he has gone on to be legendary in this medium and in the field. And I don't want to take too much time introducing him because I want to get to talk to him. So we're going to bring in right now Erik Larsen.
All right. Oh, great stuff. Am I in? No. Okay, this is happening. I can see you.
All right.
Hey, Erik.
Welcome, Erik.
All right.
How are you?
You never know. You never know how this is going to work. So.
Well, listen, Mike's had some technical difficulties over the past couple of weeks. We got that figured out. We're glad you're here. Thanks for doing this. I would love. I want to tell the listeners and people who have watched the show. I think Mike has told this story actually live about. Maybe it wasn't, but there was this great story, and I met you at New York Comic Con this year, and I told you the story that Mike has told about you getting the job on Doom Patrol, and you hadn't heard it, so I want Mike to tell the story to you, if we can do it that way to start this off.
The story starts before I went back to DC, actually. We were at various and sundry conventions, and lots of people, come up to you and ask for, you to look for that through their portfolio. And 1 out of 100 are worthy, not of work necessarily, but of, that next step, really becoming good. And they get up to a point where they get almost good enough to make it, and they can get work at that point. And I usually advise them not to do that, to take that extra time to become as good as you can, because once you start chasing deadlines, you may not get a lot better real fast. You will eventually. Erik took that advice and worked hard, and every convention I'd see him, you'd see noticeable. I saw a noticeable improvement. He was very dedicated, and his stuff was great. And it got to the point where he would become great in the business. I was over at DC. We had an opening on Doom Patrol for various reasons, and I thought, yep, let's give this kid a shot. And I went to Dick Giordano and I said, I've got the perfect guy for it. And Dick said, I've got the perfect guy for it. And he says, well, it's my editorial group. And he says, yeah, but I'm your boss. Which is true. Dick and I rarely got into fights. We averaged one a year, and when we did, it was bloody. No fight here because I took out the samples, and Dick took out his samples, and it was the same dude. It was Erik Larsen. So, okay, fine. He worked hard for that shot. Erik, you worked hard for that shot. And you did it in a way that convinced me that you really wanted it. You took the time to be as good as you could be before you made that first leap. And it was great. It was just great. And do I feel paternal? Yeah, a little, a little. I mean, I didn't do it. You did it, and the world is better for it.
All
And
right.
Savage Dragon is one of my favorite comics and has been since day one. So there.
Whew. Cool.
Well, before we get, so this is my this. I remember this. I remember
Yeah.
reading this book. This was before then. This was New
Yeah.
Dean Agents. Um, I can. There are panels from that book that I remember to this day. The fight between those two characters that you laid out was so beautifully rendered. And I'm not a fight guy, but like the metal tearing on the costumes was so awesome. And it was when you got to Doom Patrol, and I told you this, I was excited because I remembered reading that book, and I'm like, oh, same guy, good, this is great.
Before both of those, I had done an issue of Thor that had not come out.
Right.
So I was always trying. I just wanted work, man. I just needed something.
Right.
Give me a goddamn break. So I was, kid trying to break in. Self-published my own comic at 19, and
Right.
then.
Well, even that DNA book,
but I ran into Jim Shooter, and he had looked through my portfolio, and at that point it was all Megaton, and I had done something for Americomics, so I had like just a little bit of something that I had done, and so the two of us plotted out this Thor story at the convention, and then I had great samples. At that point, it was like, here's all my strengths. And, when I co-plotted it with Shooter, so it was all just guys kicking the crap out of each other, which is what I did that pretty well. It was the real struggle got to be like, okay, here's a guy, just doing ordinary stuff is way more difficult.
So the dynamic action came easy to you.
Like, yeah, it's like, holy crap! Somebody's sitting in a chair. What do I do? It's weird though, but you see people and they're just like it's like they don't know how to conform to a chair. They haven't done it before. They haven't figured that out.
How do you sit in a chair and look dynamic?
Well, that's the thing. It's like they want them to be sitting in a chair and looking cool. And it's like, crack open a John Buscema comic because he figured it out. The rest of us are sitting there struggling with
it. One of the things we like to start out with early on in the conversation is, why comics, right? It's that question. You're this talented artist. You're a talented writer. Yeah, and you've spent your career working in comics. Mm-hmm. What was it that made you fall in love with this fickle, amazing, heartbreaking, and rewarding medium? Because it's all we all know, right?
Well, my dad bought comics when he was a kid, so I grew up with his old comic book collection. He was buying stuff in the 40s and 50s.
Okay.
So he started in the golden age and was getting Captain Marvel Adventures when it was in its prime, and all the Uncle Scrooge comics that Carl Barks was doing, and then as he grew older, comics grew up with him, so he was buying all the EC comics, and bought basically until EC stopped publishing, at which point there was nothing for him anymore, and he stopped buying comic books and moved on to other things. So we had access to those when we were way too young to really be given access to those. For years, he used to delight in showing us comics on the walls at comic book stores and going, I used to have that one. And it's like we destroyed it. But I think that made an impression early, and it just, whatever reason, stuck there and stayed there. And I started buying comics regularly, maybe 5th, 6th grade, something like that. A couple comics had somehow worked their way into my life. It was just like a random issue of The Incredible Hulk and a random issue of Iron Man and some random Silver Age comics from a secondhand store. So I just had this little body of stuff, and I just started writing and drawing my own comics, mostly because I was a terrible student and no focus at all. And we kept moving around a lot because I was a terrible student, and my parents were committed to getting me an education somehow. And so we had moved from Bellingham, Washington, down to Albion, California, and basically had bought a piece of land. My parents were going to do this hippie homesteading thing, and so I moved down there with my family. So I got my older brother, 2 younger sisters, and there's just, we pull into this piece of land. There's no dwelling on it, and just going, "Hey kids, we're home." It's like, what the hell is this?
Holy cow.
So I had nothing to do. So I just started cranking out comic books, 8.5 by 11, folded in half, stapled at the side. And I was just making up my own characters. I had no real conception that comics started with issue 1, because the only comics I had weren't issue 1. So it was like, here's Dragon number 53, and here's Powerhouse number 58. And it was just awesome. I was just making random comics, and I would just put Marvel comics on the top because that's what I thought how that worked.
Right, sure.
And I was just making up my own duties, and but that was just it. I just loved comics, and I had always made comics. So at a certain point, it was just I would go to school and met other kids, and I always somehow got other kids to make their own comics too. So awesome. We would end up with, hey, here's 2 or 3 other kids who are making up their own terrible characters too. And eventually I had a stack of comics. By the time I had actually self-published graphic fantasy at age 19, I'd probably written and drawn 75 comics. So
that's crazy. So you were doomed to this
huge body of work. It was just tiny, but that was what I did.
Your numbering system for the Dragon was later adopted by Bill Morrison and the folks over at Bongo Comics for Radioactive Men. And so I really like that idea. It's number 58, whatever. That's cool.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, you can skip a lot of the bullshit by just jumping in there and just going, I don't need to do an origin story. I don't need to set anything up. It's already going.
You can wait 30 years for the origin. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we're good.
Well, Superman and Batman did not have origin stories at first.
True.
Yeah.
That you're right along with the greats. That's how it works out. He's just there, and this is what he does. Right.
This is it.
I coming back to the number ones. There's something I kind of wanted to talk about, and it was something I'd seen in doing some research, and I didn't feel this way, but you had said somewhere that there was like a negative reaction to you taking over on Doom Patrol. Like people, for some reason, they were jarred by the style. In today's comics,
zero effort to ease the transition.
And today they would just do a new number 1 if they're bringing on a new creative team, right? But
at that point, it was 5 issues into the run, and I was taking over with issue 6. And it was halfway. It was in the middle of the story. That was back in the good old days when the printers would find the companies if the books weren't there to be on press at that time. Right? Isn't that how that was going on? It's like, hey, we gotta have a comic book to publish here, come hell or high water. You've reserved the press time. You're not there. We're going to fine you. So you better be there. You're either putting a new comic in there, or we're pulling out some old reprint of something and popping it in its place.
Right.
mean,
So
some of those early comics I did were just inventory jobs that could just be sitting in a either fill-ins or inventory jobs, where it's
I
like,
wish
hey,
there were
you
more of
got
those
a
today.
job that's done and it's sitting in a drawer, so that when this other guy blows it, we can pop that in there.
And
I mean,
invariably it would get published.
it would. Most of the time it would get published. Remember, my first Doom Patrol story was not that issue of the Doom Patrol. It was a 2-part Doom Patrol meets the Suicide Squad, with the idea that this can run in either of those books, or it could be a crossover from one book to another if somebody blows it.
Yeah, that's the infamous book.
Yeah, so that thing ended up being a special.
Yes, which you know why that's infamous, right?
Because
that book was printed with no indicia.
Oh yeah, I've had a couple of those. There's been a few of those along the. It's like, oh well, whatever. Moving on.
And so, but you again, the point of there was some critical backlash. I don't know. What the right word is. And so, how did you
do that again?
Well, what do you mean by that? Like, how did that?
Well, when I followed Steve Lytle, I made no effort. So when I followed Todd McFarlane, I was like, well, this guy is way bigger than Steve Lytle could ever have hoped to have been. So I better ease this transition a little bit, because if I got pitched crap then, I'm really gonna get. And so I tried to ease into it. I was also, when I did a fill-in on Todd's run on Spider-Man, it was part 5 of a 6-part story.
Right.
So I better fit in a little bit.
And then, so when you took over after Todd on both 2 Spider-Man runs.
Yeah.
And so did you then say, I'm gonna ease this and then I'm gonna be me? Is that how you handled that? Or
that's the idea. I think I'm more in. I draw more naturally in Todd's. I mean, my stuff's a little cartoony, a little. So I'm more Todd than I am Steve Lytle to begin with.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
So while you could go, okay, I may bring more Jack Kirby power into the mix than Todd ever had, but there's still a level of.
You're still doing Jack Kirby.
Yeah, no, see, that's the thing.
In terms of your influence. And, all influences fade and become part of a broader thing. You are still doing Jack Kirby. You can see the influence, and I love every bit of that.
Sure, I agree.
Not just because, it's Jack Kirby, although that should be good enough, but because you were inspired by the right things. And you made it contemporary.
I'm not making anything that's indistinguishable from Jack, and I'm not capable of doing that. But you hope to go, well, let me at least take the good parts of this, or the parts that I can take. Let me take the power. Let me take some of the storytelling stuff. And then, well, what else can you bring to the table if I can't do everything that Jack could do? What can I do? And there's other stuff that you can go, okay, well,
you can do sex.
Yeah, I can do sex. I can do whatever. And Jack did a very shorthand anatomy. And so I was like, all right, well, let me try and do a little more, not do the completely squared off fingers and basketball knees, and let's just, try and put a little bit more of this stuff in there. I don't know. I think I found something.
You did. Let's talk about the dragon a little bit. we're approaching like 300 issues on the main series, plus minis and specials and all this stuff. And your career will always be defined in some way with Savage Dragon. Could you have imagined that in '83 when you're doing the first thing? And how do you feel about like having that legacy?
I'm all right with it. I kind of thought that I was going to end up doing Dragon towards the end of my career anyway, and my concern was that I didn't really necessarily want the end of my career to start so early. But it was like, I know once I get going on this book, nobody's going to get me to stop. So I'm going to want to do this thing forever.
You've done a bunch of other things in the middle of it.
I have. And I keep doing it too, because something will come up or somebody will be, hey, you want to do a Spider-Man story or something? It's like, all right, sure. What the hell? I haven't done one of those in a while. Yeah, things come up. I'm easily swayed by stupidity, I guess. I don't know. There's always you want to do everything, and I'm incapable of doing everything. But I do what I can.
I'm waiting to see your stories that were influenced by Carl Barks.
Yeah. Well,
and I want to see it in the Dragon, and I don't know if it'll work, but boy, it would be interesting.
So, Dean Haspiel made a comment here, and he said that you're perpetually galvanizing the joy of comics in every succeeding issue of Savage Dragon, and your line work gets even better, and better. Just thank you for watching, Dean.
Yes,
I want to,
and I agree with Dean.
I want to bring up this point, and
I'm not going to.
This is something that's for me. There's like this vlog or series of videos, and they bring in like famous or established musicians and have them like play songs that they don't know and see how they interpret it. One of the ones I saw was with Chad Smith, the drummer from Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he like plays drums on songs that he's never heard, and he fits right in. Like it's crazy. He's like some song he's like never heard, and all of a sudden he just plays the right beat and the right lines. And to me and my kids, like it's amazing. But it reminds me of artists and how they see the finished page in front of them and just go to work on a blank page. And I watched you draw, and I was mesmerized.
It's mostly because I hold a pencil like an idiot.
Well, there is that. It's not. I'm not going to use the word idiot. I didn't understand it.
No, I didn't understand it either. Whenever I see like somebody film me like from the other side, I was like, that doesn't work. That looks really painful.
Well, there's this one, right?
I don't understand this at all.
But you do a magic act, and let me explain that for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that because it definitely it's one of those things where people are like, what the hell's going on here? I gotta see this in action. I can't believe this is happening.
That's true. When the woman who is Pop Culture Squad's HBIC, and she's proud of that. When I was about to start, this show tonight, she said, "Ask Erik a question for me." And
we have remote questions for you tonight.
Yeah, this is the first time she's ever done that with me. So but I'm left-handed, and she's had to live with that, which is the sad fact. She's my daughter, okay, and she says, how does your hand cramp up? How do you do that left-handed stuff?
It doesn't cramp up, particularly unless I'm grinding out a lot of stuff. If I'm doing if I have to do like 4 or 5 pages in a day, then it can get and I can kind of shake it out, and it's all right.
You can do 5 pages in a day.
Not inked, but I can pencil 5
but
pages.
The inking is not any less strange looking than the penciling.
No, it's all this. I hold a fork that way. Everything's that way. That's just the way it is. That's the way the
I
world
think it's
is.
amazing. But by the same token, like and my point being this, reason I brought it up is that it's this concept that people who are gifted in the visual way that you are, and the ability to translate that image in your head to the page. It doesn't matter the methodology or the mechanism, but you're able to explode that onto a page. Like I have friends where I watch them draw, and I'm like, where's he going with this? And then all of a sudden it's just there. And you didn't know where it came from, but it was upside down backwards, and then all of a sudden it's Superman.
Nice. Yeah, I will say holding my pencil the way I do is sometimes my hand is in my way. And that is like I'm sitting there doing like a circle or making some shape, and at some point my hand is obscuring what I'm drawing. And
I can see that.
That is not helpful.
How do you deal with that? How do you address that?
I do end up turning the page a lot when I'm drawing. So
sure.
For those guys who are filming themselves drawing and the page just is staying there perfectly static, it's like I can't do that because my hand's in my way. So my page is just constantly whirling around, and pencils are raining off my drawing board onto the floor.
Let me tell you a story about Steve Ditko and hands. Because when you think of comic book hands, you think of Steve Ditko.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of introducing Steve to Ross Andrew. They had never met. They came up at the same time. They'd worked in the industry, but they'd never met. So Ross, who was just one of the just nicest guys on the planet, says to Steve after they do their "I really love your stuff" bit, which is earnest. It's cliched, but it's earnest. Ross asked Steve, like, well, why do you draw your hands like that? Why do you always do that? And Steve just looks at his hands, his own hands, and the fingers sort of move into position. My ride's here, excuse me. And
I live on a busy street.
and Steve said it's just more interesting that way.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that is true. And that is probably the signature move for Steve Ditko's art, and it's just more interesting that way.
It is. And there's another thing Steve does that I wish more artists would do. And he will have characters shifting their weight from one hip to another.
Yes.
And almost nobody else does that. And it's once you notice it, it's like, look at Ditko drawing that sassy ass again. He's always got somebody shifting.
Sassy ass Ditko.
It's like, why I try to incorporate that. I try to get a little bit of that, just because people always do the guys with this straight up guys where their center line is right there, and it's like, no, this could be way more interesting than it is. And Ditko's stuff was always interesting. And I thought the same with Jack. It's like even Jack's worst pages, or at least they're interesting to look at.
Right.
Well, I'm going for at least that. Maybe you might go, wow, that's terrible. But it's like, yeah, but you can't take your eyes away from it. So
interesting can be terrible. That's true.
Yeah.
And sometimes you really kind of have to fight for that terrible stuff, because it works for the story. It doesn't happen often, and I'm not advocating this as this is not advice, folks, but sometimes damn it works.
Well, and sometimes it doesn't, and you just got to you've got a deadline.
Right.
Right. There's another part of it. It's like, at the end of the day, you better have your page done.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you're just like, I've got to do this page, and I'm not happy with it, but God damn it, it's done.
For the last, I don't know, 38 years, I've been living in the land of Jim Aparo. He lived about a couple miles up the road from me. And every day, Jim would start out with a blank page. And at the end of the day, that one page was fully penciled, lettered, and inked by Jim Aparo.
Yeah.
Every day. Boom. Puts it
Yeah.
away. Next day, wakes up, puts down another board, fills it.
Yeah.
Every day. And,
and he had to work. He worked from a full script too, though.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
He had that going for him. I wrote a story that he illustrated, and I had always worked. I worked Marvel style always, and it was for Aquaman. We had half the issue was drawn by Jim Aparo, and I did send him my story or whatever plot, and he didn't know what the hell to do with it. So it's like, all right. So I wrote a full script for him. That was a first and last full script I've ever written.
So how do you work with yourself like that? This is one of my interesting things that I
right now, or when I started.
No, right now. How do you work? Like it's at this point right now. How do you, Erik the artist, deal with Erik the writer?
I just start drawing a comic, and when I get to page 20, I'm done.
Yeah, that's it. You don't write something out ahead of time.
No, there's no written plot. There's no outline. There's no anything at this point.
And then once you've done drawing it, you go back and add dialogue.
I dialogue it after it's drawn. Cool. If I've got a particularly strong bit of dialogue as I'm writing it, if something occurs to me, I'll usually write it down. Sometimes not, and then regret it.
Yeah.
Like, I know I had a good line for this, damn it. But usually it sticks with me if it's something that's strong enough.
You also with
I used to do it. Yeah, I used to do outlines where I would write, try to keep it on a single page. I would just write 1 through 20 and just a line of this happens here, just so that when I got to the end of the issue, just story beats, so that I knew that when I got to page 20, I actually am finishing where I'm supposed to finish. Because I was having some stuff where I was like, I'm going to draw this cool opening sequence, and I'd get 16 pages in and be like, shit, I didn't get to my cover, and I got 4 pages left. So I was doing outlines for a bit.
You better now.
Yeah, I don't need to do that anymore.
You've also been fortunate and clever about your choice of letterers. Your words look good on the printed page because of your choice of letterers. Marty Pasco I don't want to say of all people, he was just the one who happened to mention it, once told me that his choice of a letterer was as important to him as a writer as a penciler's choice of an inker or approval of an inker is to the penciler. And that actually made a lot of sense to me. And you can see that in your work, in your comics.
Well, I'm also doing balloon placement for all these guys. So they're not sitting there stumbling around trying to find a place to put it. Most of the time, all the time, I'm doing balloon placement. So I'm like, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. I want the sound effect to be running behind this balloon or behind this guy. And then when I do get these days, all the lettering is computer lettering. And I will put figures on top of balloons and put sound effects behind characters and all sorts of stuff, just because I want it to feel like it's part of the page. I don't want it to feel like it's just floating on top of it.
Well, sure. If you look at, sort of typeset balloons from the olden days, or
Yeah,
Leroy letter
yeah, Leroy lettering.
balloons, which was just terrible. Your eyes would get bored
Yeah,
seeing the same figures drawn, the same letters drawn the
yeah,
same
yeah,
way.
yeah,
And that was, I was really frightened by that as computers started taking over.
yeah. Hmm.
Well, letterers started using computers to take over, and
Yeah, yeah.
it hasn't quite happened.
Some,
People they've
Well, that
they've
doesn't
watched
work.
it, but
Like,
still,
people are smart about it. There are,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
with fonts, there are multiple characters for each letter that
right,
even within the same font, so that there are
there should.
methods within Illustrator that will make sure that you don't do that, that you put certain letters together in certain ways, and it's really brilliant. I recommend Nate Picos's lettering book. He tells you all about it and how that happens. But yeah,
But
no, that's that.
the stuff now
What
that drives me crazy is mixed case lettering because I think that almost always looks terrible.
it does. You know what? I
Because
I
you've
I
got
I
you've got the ascenders and then you've got the descenders, and you end up
yep,
with all this white space, and then you've got these ascenders and descenders kind of running into each other. So it's
it's
like we've got to leave a certain amount of room, or they're going to be butting. But then you've got too much too
there's a
much
lot
white.
more mixed case that's happening these days. I will agree with you,
Yeah,
and
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 well,
most of the time it's
particularly at
problematic.
Marvel,
and
particularly at Marvel,
it
because
ends up being a deal breaker for me. It's like if a book goes to mixed case, I'm like, I don't care how good this is
I'll tell you
drawn, I
the
just don't buy
first
it.
the first time I remember mixed case that I remember and I enjoyed it was on the Batman Year One run that Todd Klein did. That
oh,
that
yeah.
lettering was fantastic. That was some of the most important lettering I remember. That was a critical moment in my appreciation of lettering. That was mixed case, but it was only in the narration boxes.
Yeah, the narration. Yeah, that's a different.
My
That
Right.
attitude towards upper and lowercase lettering has sort of evolved. I started out where you are, Eric, but
yeah.
I started getting feedback once people started using it more often. Started getting feedback from teachers at conventions or in the mail or whatever. And teachers were saying, I'm glad you're doing upper and lower case lettering because that's how we talk and it's easier for us to teach kids how to read that way. And that changed my view on the subject.
Yeah,
It's
but I was
no
Um,
never, I
that's
never got
fair.
along well with teachers, so
yeah, yeah.
screw those guys.
They didn't have a picture of me up on the wall at my high school. Let me tell you.
Well, since we talked about Eric the writer and Eric the artist, you said, like, I think it was last week, I can't conceive of a circumstance where I would ever illustrate another writer's story at this point. And
That just
you,
letting people know that they don't have to butter me up anymore. I'm never gonna work. There's no point in a writer ever being nice if he doesn't mean to, you know.
so you want just tell me how
Like,
you feel. I'm never gonna draw
yeah,
your
I'm
story,
never gonna work
right?
with you. So let's just get past that. And when I still want to talk to me, fine.
You followed that though with, like, there's a lot of people who think that, who I have a tough time getting around saying I just don't want to work with you. There's no easy way to get around that, right? Or something like that. That you find,
Yeah, that's
listen,
that's like people kind of will contact me in the mail and just be like, "Hey, if you ever want to work with a painter," and send you something that looks terrible, and it's like, well, how do I even? You're terrible. And it's like I don't like saying to people, "You're terrible," but I mean, I guess it's like this isn't for me. This isn't. You just don't do things the way that I like things. I don't know. I've never come up with a super great way of doing it, but I'm sure I've broken many hearts over the years.
well,
Sorry, guys.
I listen. I don't know how to solve that one for you. I
You hire an editor and then you ask the editor to go do it.
that's what you need
Yeah,
to
it's
do.
like, can you just
Been,
go let the
been
air out
there,
of this
done
guy's
that.
tires?
Just yeah.
Yeah, Eric thinks your stuff sucks. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
I want to talk about Image just a bit. So 30 years later, Image is still standing.
Yeah.
It has a massive role in the publication of comics today. You know, Image is a massive portion of the landscape. What do you feel has been the greatest achievement of Image Comics over the years?
I'm just letting people do whatever the hell they want to, really. I mean, it's always, people have wanted a place where they can just own their own characters and do their own thing. And we've got that. And basically we set it up to go, what, let's create a comic book company that we would want to work for if we were freelancers. And it's like, we don't own any piece of anybody's stuff in any way, including their logos and everything. I mean, if somebody was like, oh, I want to leave Image, and they've got their book going, they can take it to another comic book company. They don't have to get a new anything. They can just walk right out tomorrow with it in its entirety, which is, I think it's good for us and it's good for them because it keeps us honest. We're not going to screw anybody over because we could lose them. And, and people, there's a level of trust there. Hopefully.
So,
I think Image's greatest contribution to the medium is Image Comics. And for the very reasons that you're noting, Eric, is because Image has gone out there 30 years now and has said, yeah, we can
31.
do all the things
31.
we can do all the things that you guys can do, you guys meaning, Archie, DC, Marvel.
Yeah.
And we can treat the creators fairly while we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is the comic book equivalent to the Star Spangled Banner. So, Image Comics' greatest creation is Image Comics.
Yeah.
I mean, when you guys were coming up with this crazy concept that you were going to leave the safety for what it was of this, and you're going to start doing your own thing,
mm-hmm.
did you ever in your wildest dreams think it would last the way it has and continue to grow? I mean, like you're publishing, you have a new imprint essentially as of last month, and
I had no reason to believe that we shouldn't last forever.
Good.
So it seemed like all the pieces were there. It's not the same thing that it was when we started, clearly.
Sure.
As we started, it was all guys doing their superhero comics and crossing over with each other, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside for the most part. There's still a little of that going on.
Yeah. Well, there's the nostalgia book.
I miss that. I do miss the hey, have my guy come over and you can, and so add Image.
Yeah.
Whenever anybody wants to use Savage Dragon in their book, the answer is always yes.
Well, there's I think the one of the great testaments of Image is the Local Man book that you guys are putting out, that Tim Seeley and Tony Fleece are writing, and just because I've talked to them about it, and they just, that heyday of Image in the 90s is their wheelhouse, and they just want to bash against it and make this book, and it's fantastic. I love that book.
Well, the thing to remember is everything that you do that gets before the public influences somebody, and not necessarily in a positive way, but let's focus on the positive for the moment. In the back of every issue of Savage Dragon, there lurks the work of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of whom I'm familiar with, some of whom I'm not familiar with, most of whom are great. All of them are interesting.
Mhm.
And that is an opportunity that we rarely see in comics. Just sort of a
Yeah,
showcase,
yeah.
and I admire that.
And that just comes about by people who want to be part of it, who just want to be part of the book. Um, and I could run letters there and often do, but it's, these guys show up and they go, hey, I want to be part of this thing. I want to play along. Can I do a story? And if they're decent enough, then okay. But
That's awesome.
I should note those guys are not, for the most part, aren't paid anything to do it. It's just I've got pages to fill. If you want to do something, that's fine. If you don't, that is perfectly okay too, because there are other people who would like to put something in there. And if there's not, there's letters pages, and I've always got a million sketches that I could be running in the back of stuff.
Sure.
Just I've got 32 pages to fill somehow. So
Only 22 pages of story and figure it out.
a lot of people want to break into the industry and don't know how to break into the industry, and they have just no idea of how anything works. And it's like, so if I can write them a 6-page story or plot a 6-page story and go, just draw this, that is such a valuable thing as just a training ground of, like, I would have loved that. And I did that, I mean, that was essentially what I did at age 19 when I printed my own comic, but that I drew a whole, 20-page story. This is just, can you do 6 pages? Can you tell a story in that? Here's the basic idea for you. Take it. And then I'll script it. I'll get it professionally lettered. If it needs to be colored, I'll get it colored. And you're going to have something that's in print that you can show to other people and go, see, I can do 6 pages. I can do something.
Mm-hmm.
And all this
That's
stuff, you just kind of learn how to do this stuff. I'm sorry, keep interrupting you.
No, I'm interrupting you. I want to hear what you have to say, please.
It's like, I wanted to know that. I wanted to know how do I do this, and having something in print is so valuable. Just to be able to go, oh, this stuff shrinks down, and this tight little rendering that I put on something has become unrecognizable.
Yeah.
It's so helpful to know, oh, things change when they're smaller, and oh, I should leave room for dialogue, and this character's face is changing too much from one panel to the next, and it's not really even clear that he's the same guy anymore. That's something I should take away and maybe work on. All that stuff is just
When I was
I got nothing.
when I was in my mid-teens, which was right before they invented fire, I was at a local bank had this exposition of original comic strip art, newspaper comic strip art, and
Oh, wow.
you didn't see that anywhere in America in the mid 1960s. So I was there like several times, and I got them to open the bank for me when it was closed. This is the truth. Just to see that again, and I would look at the spectacular original art, all done at least twice up,
Yeah.
and you're looking at Milton Caniff, and you're, which is a wonderful experience on
Oh yeah.
the worst day, and you realize how much of the detail that's there, any artist really, that you don't see because it's printed by these, on these rubber plates.
Yeah.
And they're not going to adjust it for your strip, and it's going to be published on a page with 100 other strips anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no focal point to it. And then you see somebody like Roy Crane, with all of the duotone stuff, and it's like that is the greatest learning experience for a comics person, to see how it looks in print when you've never figured out the steps to take it to that point.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think if you're trying to figure this stuff out, just buying a piece of original art by anybody
Yeah,
is really really helpful. Just to be able to
Sure.
go, oh crap, I had no idea it was drawn big. Why you
right,
draw it bigger than the,
Right.
than the page?
right.
What the hell? And every now and then you'd run across something. Go, oh, they did it print size. I didn't even know that was an option either. I got a
Jack
page
Cole.
from uh, I got a page from Superman, Spider-Man, the first one, Ross Andrew, Dick Giordano,
And they did it print size.
print size. It was like,
Wow.
holy crap. That's one way of doing it.
Jack Cole did all that Plastic Man work, print size.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. I was totally blown off the map when I heard that. Jay Lynch, the so-called underground cartoonist, was the world's biggest Jack Cole fan, to the point where he actually had his suicide note in his collection. And
Wow.
That's a little too much.
he had, well, Jay-Z was a little unusual, but he talked Hugh Hefner out of it. That's the best
Wait,
part.
so
of
Hugh Hefner had the suicide note.
Well, it was
Wow.
written to him. Dear Hugh, I'm sorry I'm going to kill myself, but thanks for all the work. Essentially, that's what he said.
Wow.
And
This is why you come
Oh.
on the show, Eric, because you're never going to hear these things anywhere else.
Jeez.
and you look at this stuff and you go like, Alex Toth worked twice up. You're working the same size. My God.
Sometimes he didn't. Alex worked various sizes when he was doing
Yes,
stuff
yes.
at Archie towards the end. He did the Fox stuff. I think that was print size.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I
wouldn't be surprised. Hope you're listening, Dean.
I wish that they would stop printing that Fox stuff or trying to reprint it, because they don't, whatever they're using for, it doesn't do it any justice today.
It's probably the negatives.
I'm sure.
which
I'm
is
sure.
not well kept, but yeah. I mean, again, that 15-year-old at that bank, that closed bank, looking at all
Yeah.
that original art.
Yeah.
It's
that's
awesome.
a great education.
And one of the cool things actually about going from having everything letter on the boards to working, where lettering is digital, is that first I don't have to pencil the whole goddamn book at once and send it off and then get it back and do that. So that process has changed. Now I can just go, I've got an idea for a page. I'm going to draw a page today, and I hope I come up with an idea tomorrow for another. But you can also be, I want to work a different size. I want to try out doing an issue that's twice up. Let me see what that feels like to do. Or let me try doing an issue where I'm drawing it really small and see what that looks like.
Sure. The scale is in your hand. Right?
Yeah, I did a couple issues where I just varied every page, where I was like, I'm going to do this page tiny, I'm going to do this page huge, I'm going to do whatever the hell I feel like doing at the time, and seeing how that worked. So
First of all, I agree with Dean's comment. Second,
Dean's
of
paying
all,
attention.
Yeah, he is, and hey, that's great. Not that he doesn't. I just feel honored. Neil Adams drew Superman versus Muhammad Ali, which I think is one of his best jobs. And every couple of pages, he decided to change the aspect ratio. Not just the size he was working at, but the aspect ratio.
Oh,
Now,
that could be a problem.
I know that he liked Jack Adler. I don't think he was trying to get back at Adler. Adler was running DC's production department at the time. But that job was a nightmare.
Hell no.
production.
Sounds like
And-
something
and-
Jack would have complained about for the rest of his life.
If he had
Well,
time,
Because I
I mean,
was
he'd
because I
complain
was
about everything
doing
else.
in this particular case, I'm scanning it all myself, so I was resizing every page. So when I sent it to the letterer, they didn't know that I had drawn it varying sizes. As far as they were,
That's that's the whole concept. Is the scales in your hands? Nobody can tell you.
it would have
how to
been
do
wrong.
But if you look back at the Ali book, there's no way you would know that every page was done at a different size. It's just,
Yeah, no, it looked good.
yeah, it's remarkable.
I want to just put comics on the side for a second.
Okay.
One of the things that's interesting about you is that you've never been. Listen, we have so much to do. We only have so much time. You've never been shy about sharing your opinions on politics and social world that we're living in. You're very open about that. Do you ever second guess that openness?
I think it can be to the detriment of the work at times, especially if you're infusing it into your work.
Okay.
Because I think sometimes it can be, if you're not doing it with a light enough touch, it can seem very preachy and, kind of ham-fisted.
And you're careful with that?
So you try to approach it as carefully as you can. I know I had done an issue after Donald Trump was elected, and I used him as a villain on the cover and all this other stuff, but I didn't put any words in his mouth in the interior of the comic at all. He didn't say so much as a word. And almost all of the dialogue from his supporters was taken from different sources in the internet, where I would go to Twitter, and I would go to comments on YouTube videos, and I would just take those and be, okay, if people are going to be saying something, they're going to be those. And in terms of how they were looking, even, I was like, well, what does a Trump supporter look like? Let me find one and use him as my reference for a Trump supporter. So, when people were getting outraged about that particular issue, it was like, okay, that's interesting.
Well, do you expect that?
Nah, I think I've scared off most of the conservatives at this point.
That's easy to do. It's unfortunately easy to do because I love scaring them. Max Allan Collins had this phrase, probably still does, about how he would lob grenades into the audience and then throw himself on top of them. And I thought, wow, that's like rabble rousing 101. That's great. That guy knows how to do it.
I don't tend to worry about it too much, but it does kind of seem like you're preaching to the choir. Like, okay, everybody who's on your side you're changing their minds, and everybody who's on the other side, you're not changing their minds either. True. So it becomes kind of
sides. There's not two sides.
Well, it's a
seems like it.
It's a mess. It's a mess. It's true. All over the place.
We always divide people into two camps: pro and con, anything. And most people don't feel that way. They have different attitudes about different things. So sometimes making those comments, you're filling in some of those blanks or making some suggestions along the way. They may agree with you 80% of the time, but that other 20%, you may be opening their eyes to something new, or at least making them think. And I don't care as much as how they wind up, as long as they're thinking about their lives and the world.
Well, I try to be more insidious about it rather than being ham-fisted, because I think the chick tracts don't necessarily convert as many people as you'd like. So if I can do something that's the little more subtle in there, I think you can go, okay. Just having somebody say something like, whatever it is, you can, there's
Sure.
a line or two can be enough rather than let's just hammer this home for an entire issue and see, like people don't want to be like
an entire issue about any one narrowly defined thing sucks.
Yeah.
It's always a mistake. Get on with your life, give people a story. Our first job is to tell people a story. It's visual storytelling. So that's our first job. Now, having something to say does not necessarily get in the way of that unless you won't shut up.
Yeah. You need to entertain along the way too.
Yes.
It's like if you're making somebody laugh or cry or get frustrated or whatever, that definitely helps.
I worked with Abby Hoffman for 3 years, and if that was the only thing I'd ever learned from Abby, that would have been my graduate course on Earth.
What was the thing that you learned from Abby that you?
If you make it entertaining or interesting, which is entertaining, you're going to get people's attention, and they're going to pay a little bit more attention, by and large, to what you have to say, if they're willing. If they're going to walk up to you and say, well, I disagree with you, so screw you, it's like, okay, why are you bothering me?
Right.
But if they have any sense of an open mind, you're going to get through with entertaining them, opening the door in an entertaining way, much better than by proselytizing. And believe me, I do both.
I got one more here, or a couple more anyway.
Yeah.
What's a character that you didn't create that you've enjoyed working on the most?
That I enjoyed working on the most?
That you enjoyed working on the most?
I mean, thus far?
Thus far, obviously.
I mean,
my question is kind of like, I kind of have a sneaking, like, you tried to work on Nova a lot before you finally did, from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, that was just one of the few books that I was able to get into on the ground floor.
Right.
Because so many other books were well into their runs. So that when Nova came along, it was like, oh, wow, look at this. A book that's starting with issue 1. And it's introducing me the characters from the beginning. Wow, this is cool. This is something new. This is not something that was commonplace. And now things start with issue 1 all the time.
Yeah.
And they're not a beginning. So it's like, well, this is the worst of all worlds.
Yes.
Right? It's like you've done nothing. What have you gotten? It's like, oh, it's the first issue of Spider-Man. We're starting with issue 1, and the Scorpion showing up, and he wants revenge. It's like, for what? What has he ever done? This is my introduction to these characters. What is he? Why does he want revenge?
When I named First Comics, I was touching on a joke that our friends in the industry today never got. You can't call everything the first issue. And if it's a first issue, it should be a first.
Yeah.
There are 6 or 8 different Superman number 1s, but only one, and I'm not talking financially, is worth a damn.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Superman number 1 is not the first Superman.
That's true.
That's true too.
That's true. But there was no continuity in those days, so who cares?
That's true too. And I don't mind those
dudes. They introduced characters, and then those characters were around from that point thereafter. So there was continuity in a sense that when Lex Luthor showed up again, he wasn't you weren't introduced to him as though he was a new guy. It was
That's
still,
true,
hey,
but
you've been here.
he was a new guy because originally he had that red hair, and then
Yeah,
with the second or third or fourth story or
I
something
mean,
down the line, he
they just
became
got
bald,
confused.
which is pretty much how it happened to me. So okay,
you've had opportunities where you could have relaunched Savage Dragon.
Oh yeah,
There were decent points where you said we could have just started number one here. Why didn't you?
I just like to be in. I like the big number. I like it. I also like to be able to know in what
Where to
order
start and where
read
to
it.
end?
Yeah, I started with a miniseries. I did 3-issue miniseries, and then I did an ongoing book, and I've regretted renumbering it from that for 30 years. You know, I started the ongoing title in 1993, and it's like, why? I could have, and it just would have added 3 more issues to my total, but it's like I could be on 270, not 267. What the hell? What's
but
wrong
that
with me?
fourth issue would have made you a lot less money.
No, it would have. It would have made me a lot.
And I'm not saying that that's the reason why you should or should not do something.
Yeah, no. Well,
That is the reason why they do it today, though.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
no,
true.
today it's just that they're gasping for air. Here, look, see number one. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, those numbers were gigantic. I mean, people were. Yeah, that was life. A single issue was life-changing money for a lot of people back at that time, which was crazy. Because it's, you would hire guys to do stuff for you, and they'd do an issue, and then they'd vanish for a year. It's like, wow. what did I do? But I just paid off my mortgage, so.
Congratulations.
No, I mean, with my first book.
With that
With your
first
first
book,
book, right? Exactly.
With my first issue, yeah. So it was like, okay, this is all right. I should do some more of these.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, that worked out all right.
Over the years, things have changed. So do you enjoy the access that social media has granted fans and admirers to public figures like yourself? It doesn't have to be yes or no answer. It could be more nuanced.
Yeah, I mean, it is a yes and no answer. It's both,
right.
Because while it's great to be able to have that kind of access and be able to have some conversation with your audience, geez, it's a distraction. And geez, it can absolutely suck up hours of your day. And it can also be this thing where it replaces the work for a lot of people, I think, where they go, I do this work so I can get this feedback, or I can just post something on Facebook and get way more feedback than a month's worth of work. And that's a dangerous thing, because if you're just living off of
it's
that,
dangerous because the feedback is not what pays your mortgage off.
Yeah, no, it's like you got to pay your rent. You got a job to do.
Also, there should be a reason for celebrity, and after a while, you don't have that reason. You're just a talking head on the internet. He said, as a talking head on the internet,
right? I mean,
but okay. I mean, I've done 50 years worth of work. If that's how I want to spend my doddering years, fine. Artists and writers work alone in a room.
Mm-hmm.
Often
or in a
with the
coffee
door
shop.
closed. Or yeah. I know. If nobody wrote, Panera would be out of business. But
I draw in a coffee shop once a week.
Do you?
Yeah.
Why is that? Is that intentional? You're like, I have to do this time?
Yeah. Well, when we bought this house that we're living in now, it's an old house. It's
sure.
It's an old Victorian in San Francisco, and it needed a lot of work initially. So we had bought the place, and then we were living in the East Bay at the time, and I had a son who we decided, well, you're starting high school. Let's start you high school in San Francisco.
Sure.
And then, I'll drive you, and then I can check in on the house and see how the guys are doing on the house. And then I just got in this habit of, I'm just going to go to the coffee shop or find a place to work every day. And I kind of liked it. So it's like, make some friends at just hanging out at this coffee shop. And it got to be 2-3 people would just sit around and gas and draw comics or whatever it is they're doing. And that just became a thing. So
I think
That's great.
I think that's awesome. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I enjoy hearing stories of in the heyday of things, where people would draw communally, where studios that were set up, people would do that. I think so many people who are coming up today don't have that type of community while they're doing it. And so do they then take that, try to get that from social media? Maybe that's something that's
that's the thing, is when you're out in the world like that, you're not sitting there going, hey, let's all get together and all sit on our phones.
No.
It's, hey, let's all get together and we're going to be drawing. So during that period of time, that however long it is, generally it's 4 hours before you don't really want to be sitting there any longer. But I get a lot of done. I can lay out several pages or start inking some stuff or doing whatever. I mean, I'm not inking with the proper tools when I'm out in the wild, but I can be ruling stuff out or doing some background stuff or there's always some nonsense that needs to be done. And then I'll come home and sweeten it up with real ink.
How much of your process is digital versus pen and paper, pencil and paper? Like, is it change often?
It varies. I tried doing a couple issues digitally just to see how I liked it, and I don't really like it that much.
We can't scratch the iPad.
Oh yeah, you can.
I was
That's
the problem.
Actually cracked my webcam tab out here. So
one of the things that we forget, because we're fortunate and we can afford to forget, is that in the early days of those shops and those studios in the 30s and the early 40s, pre-World War II, that's where everybody worked, and they would help each other out, and they would, but they were all young kids helping each other out. The bosses, the Will Eisners who were running the shop, the Jerry Eigers who were running the shop, were in their early 20s. So that was a learning experience. It was a shared learning experience.
Oh yeah. You would be learning from your peers around you as you figured all this stuff out. And you'd always have some guy taking his shirt off so you could see how the muscles fit together. Or some jackass. Well, how does the hands work? Come on, Steve, show me what your hands look.
And that's why most artists from the 40s and 50s, comics artists, are men and don't know how to draw women's ankles. If you look at women's ankles in 1950s comics, 60s comics even, you'd see that these are a bunch of guys who never saw a woman before. And that's because in those little studios and stuff, they were all guys.
It's not happening, man. Not happening, Dean.
Oh, he was talking to you. Oh, thank God. Thank God.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
you don't want to see what's under this shirt. I'm telling you.
No. Listen, Dean Dean's his own man. He prepares. He has to be prepared all the time for that. But like, so you don't we were back to the how much digital. So do you draw the pages, pencil them, ink them, or do you ink them digitally?
No, it's all on, for the most
On
part,
board.
it's all on paper.
And then
There
you
are,
scan it in and mess with it.
yeah, and then I scan it in, and then I clean it up digitally. Sometimes there will be digital effects,
Mhm.
like zipatone kind of thing.
Sure. That's crazy.
Uh,
I mean, that's one of the best. I think one of the most interesting things. Like you don't have to go and
yeah,
buy it right
yeah.
there.
There's that, and I've actually started using regular zipatone again, the real stuff, recently, just because I realized I've got a drawer full of this shit that I bought,
Sure,
years and
because you were
years
going
ago.
to need it.
I was going to need it, and now it's sitting there going, if I don't use this, somebody's just going to toss it out at some point. I'm going to die with a drawer full of zipatone.
That's
So
not
it's
how you
like,
want to go.
yeah, well, it's like I've got enough other crap that people have got to deal with. Why curse them on them? And also it is kind of interesting to use, and it's kind
Oh
of
yeah,
fun to use. So,
it is.
you got to use it. And if you run out of one of them, well, it's like, well, you can always go back to using the digital stuff because that's still there.
Ben Day.
Ben Day.
Ben Day
Yeah.
dots.
Yeah, well, back in the strip days, they
Yeah.
wouldn't even apply that, depending on the strip, because some of it you see the originals and they'll put blue down, and then that would be done. I don't know who the hell did it, but somebody's cutting
It'd be
ruby
done
lip.
in production at the Syndicate. Yeah, it's that gets me back to Roy Crane. I mean, if somebody fell across a box full of dual-shade paper, they'd be wealthy beyond their dreams today. But if they waited 10 years, all the people who would give a fuck would be dead.
Yeah.
That's not fair. No, because we're gonna. We're coming down to the end here, and I appreciate you doing this, Eric. I really do. There's another 30 years of Erik Larsen to come, right? So what is? Are there still dream projects out there for you?
I think
Things
you
that
just
you.
scared them.
Well, that's a lot. I'm just saying. We
The
got
problem is I like to do everything, and I know that I'm incapable of doing everything. So at this point, mostly it's going to be Savage Dragon, and then occasionally somebody will come about with something that'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Let me try that. Like I did a Captain America story a few years back, and it was just, hey, what, do Captain America the end? Well, if you were to do the last Captain America story, what would it be? And it's like, oh shit, I've never really drawn a Captain America story before, and they kind of wanted me to do a Kirby riff, and it's like, okay. So it's like, oh, I want to do this, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, and then I did it. It's like, all right, that shield's a pain in the ass. But it was sort of a one-off, and I had done, and Spider-Man pulls me back in every now and then too.
I really love your Spider-Man. I really do.
Try this. It's weird because I was not a Ditko guy growing up, particularly. I was way more of a Kirby guy, but then I got into it. I was like, God damn it, this guy is good. Got to give him that.
Some of those guys who are my favorite artists, guys like Joe Kubert and Steve and people like that, have a style that a lot of people who aren't into comics look at and are repelled by. It's like, well, this isn't interesting. This is kind of garish. And I would say, yeah, that's the point. That's what the story is about. Well, war is garish. You know,
Or
anything that he
ugly.
touches. Yeah.
Or
Oh yeah.
ugly, man. Because like a lot of Ditko stuff, it's like, wow, this is really ugly. Why
Yeah.
is it? Why can't I look away? It's like,
Right. Right. And
Sure.
why is he drawing, Wonder Woman? Wow.
well, also it's like looking at Kubert stuff and just isolating different corners of it and going, he's drawing people in the background and it's a circle with an X underneath it, and that's a person. Why why do all these little things that don't look right at all, if you isolate them, once it's all together on this drawing, look so
Yeah.
fucking amazing? Well, why does
Yes.
this work? I don't understand why this works. These pieces
Exactly.
are so crude, and that does not look like a hand, and that does not look like a gun, and yet taken all together, that this page is brilliant.
Yeah, and
Yes.
the concept of that is like imagine it at drawing scale, like where the size he drew it at. Because when it gets shrunk down, it fits. But like even as it's got to be uglier at life size.
Yeah, it depends on the
That,
page. Sometimes he's cranking through that stuff too, and other
but
times it's like, all right, this is more labor.
but that's the beauty of comics.
Yeah,
It really
Yeah,
is.
that
yeah.
is
It's we're doing stuff in little bits and pieces. Even if we're like in your case, Eric, you're doing most of it yourself. It's still you're thinking of it in bits and pieces. You have to keep in the back of your mind how it's all going to work together, or you have to be
Yeah.
unnatural. And those guys scare me, but they're beautiful.
it. It's one of the concepts, and I had this conversation with I think one of my sons earlier today, about how you know the artist in whatever medium will create something that you will not, that if you saw it being created you wouldn't expect that the piece of art that was created looks and is that artistic. Like it's that whole concept, like all of these small little pieces and the people running around and grabbing vellum and slapping it onto page this way and turning the page upside down and drawing that way, and then figuring out how everything is going to put together, even to today where it's all digital in certain ways. All those pieces have to come together in this magical way that fit with the words in the right balloons, and it works, and this art gets created out of thin air, and it's amazing.
The
Yeah.
most important brush or pencil that we have available to us is inside our brain pans. You have to be able to sort the forest out for the trees, and if you think about it, you're gonna screw it up.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I don't think I've ever drawn a drawing in my life that looked the way that it did in my head. I
Right.
don't think that's
Really,
happened. No, I just start and then it's like suddenly I'm pulled in some other direction to do something else with it.
that's the cool part, because I do know people who I asked them that same question. Like, did you know? Like, I saw somebody, a friend of mine was drawing, on one of those bar things, like the coasters for like a drink and draw,
Yeah.
and he did so much under drawing, and at the end of it, I'm like, did you know what you were doing that whole time? Like, you drew this whole thing and then you just covered it up. He's like, yeah, I was planning on doing that. Like, it was exactly how he had thought it to come out. Like, wow, it's just
Yeah, I'm
you're not,
like,
so yours are not. It shows up.
whenever I have a pen or anything in my hand, I have yet to ever put down the line even that I intended to put down. It's always like, God, now how do I compensate for that?
It's just a never-ending series of compensations.
It's just it's never ending trying to, yeah. It's like, oh, that arm is too long, that hand is too weird, that face doesn't look quite right, that mouth is off, and sometimes, digitally I'll be like, I got to take these guys' eyeballs and pull them farther apart because they screwed that up. But whatever.
Storytelling is done by magicians.
Fair.
Sometimes you
Fair.
need to sometimes you need to think it through. Sometimes you need to just let it happen. But it's magic. And that's the part that communicates best. The magic. It comes from
Yeah.
your heart, it comes from circumstance, it comes from the paper, it comes from your expectations, it comes from Mars. But the end result is the whole thing. That's what it's about. That's storytelling.
All right.
All right, Eric, we have a question. I don't know if you want to answer this or if it should be thing, but someone
Okay.
wants to know if Vanguard will be back in the Dragon book with its own stories.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Excellent. Perfect answer. Perfect answer.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I kind of had nowhere to go with him, so I kind of wrote him out because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this dude. But at some point later down the road, I'm sure that I'll just rope him back in because it'll be like, I haven't used this guy in a while. Let me pull him back in. There's no plans for him to show up, but that's never stopped me before. You know, I didn't plan to tell Dragon's origin ever, and I ended up doing it. And
Yeah. What did you how did you get to that point?
well, I got to that point because we were doing a special hardcover book that was to
Right.
celebrate 10 years of Image Comics, and it was everybody's who came and did a character at Image is going to come back and do their original character again, and I was still doing the damn book. So it was like, well, how am I going to make this special? I'm already doing my character every month for the last 10 years. So how is this going to be different? So that was when I was like, well, I haven't done this. And I was also really concerned about my partners being fuck ups. So I was thinking, well, if I do a story that ties into what I'm doing now, and this thing ends up sitting on the shelf for 2 years, and then I've got to work it into continuity, god damn, that's a nightmare. And if it ends up coming out on time, that's a nightmare too, because then it happens before. So it's like people asking,
need a story that was out of continuity.
People ask me, are you going to ever draw like a last issue just in case you die? Then they can print this last issue. It's like, what the hell's wrong with you? First of all,
no,
I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to die. So what am I going to set it 30 years in the future on the off chance that I last that long, or do I set it, 2 issues from now on the off chance that I get hit by a bus? Like the characters age in the book all the time. Like they're constantly aging. How the hell would I possibly make that work? And also, if I did set it 20 years in the future, it would be hanging over me like the stone over Shazam, where I would just be, where I'm sitting there going, now I can't do this, and this because I've already set this up, and that's got to stay right there. I got to make sure that character is alive. God damn it. I'm sure sick of them by now, or whatever. Am I just going to have it be one guy sitting there all by himself going, well, I outlived them all. God damn it. It's like, you don't even know who this dragon character is. It just is, that's just unfathomable to be. So my thought process doing Dragon right now, going into it, is every issue I'm writing as though it's the last issue. Okay. It's like, all right, if I die tomorrow, is this a good ending? Pretty good. Okay, next.
All right,
next
let's
issue.
try it again.
All right, let's try and do another. And that seems to work out all right, because then I've always got big shit. Things are blowing up all the time. It's like, holy crap, you upended this book and now they're in some other place. You destroyed the earth and now he's in a different world. What the hell are you going to do now? And that's been kind of a fun way of doing it.
Do you regret the origin story? Like, because it was out of you you just gave a bunch of great answers as to why you did it after so long. Did it cause you
Well,
storytelling issues?
what it happened was once that was out, then it was, well, now there's no sense in the character not knowing his own origin, and there's no sense in not playing with some of the things that I've set up in that origin story. It's like, oh, there are characters in there that I can bring back into the book, and there are little pieces of stuff. And then I was able to, at that point, change Dragon into being the guy he was before his origin. So I could be like, oh, he can be the villain. He can be Emperor Kerr and come in there and try and destroy the Earth. And it's like, okay, I was able to get a cool villain out of the deal.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, I wanted it to be this thing that he never finds out, but I don't give a shit. You know, life is too short for regrets. So just like,
it's comics.
Oh, well, it is what it is. You know, keep on rolling. So,
all right. I appreciate this. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time, Erik. It was wonderful. You are welcome back anytime. We can set this up again. Maybe
right.
Not 200 issues later. And
I need to get one.
Yeah. But thanks so much for doing this, and come back soon. And best of luck.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Mike, Mike wants to say something. I can't hear you.
Your mic's
can't hear you at all. I saw you go mute and not mute. Check the little button on it. Check the little button. Is there a mute button there?
Sign language. Write me a letter. I keep seeing your microphone with an X on it.
Yeah. Can you hear me, right? You hear me?
We'll talk later, Mike. I can't lip read. All right. Goodbye to you both. We'll talk later.
Thank you very much. Okay. Can anybody hear me? I hope so. Can you hear me? Okay. You can hear me. Well, I don't know what happened to Mike's mic, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to be back next week, guys. We have a guest lined up next week. We're going to have comics writer Amit Tischler on, who has a new book coming out this week, tomorrow, called Eden Frost. It's really good. I recommend it. And he's going to be on next week, Tuesday, same time. And we might be booked out, for most of the rest of the year. We definitely have more guests coming. Thanks for joining us. And again, we're going to fix Mike's mic. And we'll see you guys later.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?